I'm terrified, I'm paralyzed, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to start. I think definitely in the early days, I really hid behind email. I didn't want clients to know how young I was and that they were trusting their multi-million-dollar marketing budgets or campaigns with someone who was 21 and, had just started a business. I was learning how to hire, I was learning how to fire, I was learning how to manage people and build systems and all of those things completely from scratch. We keep reading about in the news, AI is here. What is our company doing? Do we have a plan? Do we have a strategy? What's that going to mean for my job or my department or our industry or our company? AI to me just jumped out before this sort of explosion now as something that would be absolutely transformative for my businesses. And I think the businesses that I own and for sort of the industry that I've always worked in was ripe for disruption by AI.
Hello crew, let's talk about the climb and not just the peak. Taryn Williams is one of those rare founders who didn't just enter an industry, she rebuilt it from the inside out. At just 21, she launched Wink Models, turning a tiny idea into one of Australia's most successful commercial modelling agencies. Then she did it again, twice and more. She built theright.fit, scaled it to thousands of talent and clients across APAC, raised venture capital from Airtree and global funds, and exited to international acquirers. And instead of slowing down, she's now back with Gifted, a Shopify plugin used by brands like Accor, PE Nation, Estee Lauder, and Panasonic and more, redefining how influencer gifting is done at scale. After 2 decades, Taryn has become a force at the intersection of talent, technology, and media. Wow. A founder who has survived hypergrowth, chaos, crashes, boardrooms, burnout, and the brutal emotional attacks that comes from building something from nothing. Taryn, welcome to Fayl Tales.
Thanks for having me.
What an interesting background. You built your first company at 21. I'm keen to hear more of that journey.
Yeah, blissful naivety of youth, I think. You don't realize exactly how terrifying and difficult it's going to be at that age. You really have nothing to benchmark it against. So yeah, it was, I'd been modeling myself and I could see all of the sort of inefficiencies and inequalities in the industry. And I really just thought it could be done better. One of the big pain points for me was that talent didn't get paid for sort of 60, sometimes 90 days from the date of doing a job, which is obviously unheard of in any other industry.
Yes.
There was this kind of logic from agents that, well, we need to be paid by our client and our client needs to be paid by the advertising agency and the advertising agency needs to be paid by their client. So we can't pay you until we get paid. And I was like, no other industry works like that though.
Why are you special?
Exactly. Your cash flow is not my problem.
Yes.
You should be able to manage that and pay talent fortnightly or monthly at least. And so I thought it was also sort of quite a dysfunctional relationship between clients and agents and talent. And I just thought it doesn't need to be this hard. We can just have a really beautiful relationship, treat everyone with decency and respect, pay talent weekly so they can afford to stay in the industry. They don't have to go and get second jobs, so they can be available for more castings and more bookings. This all made sense to me as a really simple premise. If we treat people well, both clients and talent, and we pay them on time, we'll have a great thriving business. So
yeah,
simple idea. And yeah, the business has grown year on year, every year for 21 years now.
That's
so
amazing. What was
crazy.
The initial reception of this new business model?
Yeah, so our clients were incredibly appreciative that obviously we didn't force them to pay any more quickly. They could still pay in 30, 60, 90 days and we bankrolled that. So obviously we just reinvested all the cash back in the business and they were incredibly appreciative because it meant that they had talent who were enthusiastic about doing jobs. They got paid on time. They would drop everything to be available for a last minute booking because they knew that they were going to be paid the following week, which was unheard of. So for our clients, it got them access to better talent. And obviously for talent, it was transformative for them. It meant that they could do what they love and they wanted to do, and they didn't have the uncertainty around when they were going to be paid, if they were going to be able to pay their rent this week. And so it earned us a lot of loyalty from our talent as well.
Wow. What were some initial wins? Because you're young, you're working in this really dynamic industry where often, I know back in the days from the models I've met, they said that they felt like there were small fish in a big sea. And as a woman especially, often it felt like other women were making the big decisions. It was mostly made by men. How did you navigate that?
Yeah. So I think definitely in the early days, I really hid behind email.
Okay.
I didn't want clients to know how young I was and that they were trusting their multi-million-dollar marketing budgets or campaigns with someone who was 21 and, had just started a business. Clients were really receptive. We were one of the first agencies in Australia to have ethnic diversity and age diversity. So, this is quite unheard of 20, 21 years ago where clients could come to us and they could get talent who were 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, and also all different kind of ethnic backgrounds and body types and sizes. So for them, it was transformative. One of our first clients was Nokia, back when Nokia were a huge deal. And they wanted to do a global ad campaign, and they were like, we need talent of all different ethnic diversities, and we need to have these scenes where people, like it was business case scenes, but also social case scenes. And they're like, we need to be able to showcase that in campaigns that are going to be shared globally. And it was really hard for them traditionally to be able to go to a talent agency in one market and get all of those things. So for them, it was, transformative in being able to find all of the people they needed from one agency in one place.
That's really good. How did you scale it over time?
It was completely organic growth. So yeah, it was wild. So for the first probably year or 2 years, it was on referral only. Like we would only take clients that had been referred by someone else. And our talent was so appreciative of the work that we were doing for them and how we represented them that they were constantly referring clients to us as well and other talent. So it grew completely organically. I reinvested all of the money back into the business. And as we grew, we obviously hired more staff, built more technology, all of those things. And so it was a really, really beautiful, I look back on that journey. It's like such a beautiful journey. Like it was, of course, had like really challenging times. And it was a baptism of fire. I was learning how to hire. I was learning how to fire. I was learning how to manage people and build systems and all of those things, like completely from scratch with no experience, no background in any of those things. So it was a really challenging time, but one that I look back on was just like such appreciation. It was a really beautiful, and still is like a really beautiful business. So
yeah, it's impressive that you managed to be a model and then wear the hat of CEO and all these other hats and still seamlessly develop a very amazing company. How did you then transition into your next gig, I guess, and venture?
So probably about 15 years ago, I built an end-to-end onboarding, calendar management and payroll integration software for Wink, because we had about 450 models Australia-wide. And they're all employees. So there's a carve out in the Australian tax law that models can't be contractors or freelancers. They have to be employees. It's a very niche situation.
Why do they have
a flat 20% tax? And essentially because in that sort of working dynamic, no one was paying tax and super. So the ATO was like, right, someone needs to pay superannuation for these people. These people need to be paying tax. How can we make that happen? And so they basically passed a law that actors, performing artists, models, influencers all have to be paid on tax file numbers. Someone needs to withhold the tax and super, and it needs to be managed for them. They can't use ABNs. So obviously because of that, we had, as you can imagine, huge pool of talent that we were managing as employees. We had to track the hours of their shifts, whether or not they'd meet the minimums for superannuation payment that month, all of these things. And I was like, right, I'm going to build an end-to-end platform that onboards all of our talent, all of their skills, qualifications, driver's license details, photo details, measurements, all of those things, right through into availability checks, like are they available for that casting? Because a lot of the jobs are fast turnaround. So it's two-way SMS, email integration, push notifications, all of those things, then into scheduling them on jobs, and then post-campaign things like expense claims, it integrates with Xero, manages their payroll, all of those things. So it was a pretty big system to custom build, but there was nothing available off the shelf that really did what I needed it to do. And this was 15 years ago. It was a really long time ago. Xero didn't even exist at the time. So it was like quite a big step. And so I built this system, went out, found a company that could do it, that had built a similar platform for a mining company to manage their fly in and fly out staff. So do you have this kind of license? Can you work on this shift in Broome or wherever? And built that. It was supposed to take, I don't know, maybe 3 months and cost like $90,000. It took 18 months and cost like $500,000, like scope creep. And also I had no idea about building an MVP or any of these things. So I was like, I definitely want to add that feature, and let's, add that as well while we're at it. So I got to the end of the build and it was super painful, but I was like, this transformed the business. I learned so much, and I just loved this, like I can solve business problems using technology. Mm-hmm. So I got to the end of that and I was like, what I really should have done is built this as a marketplace. It was just as Freelancer had launched, and I didn't know what a marketplace was. And I was like, oh my God, instead of clients calling or emailing us with their brief, us putting it into the system, sending it out to models, checking their availabilities, scheduling them on shifts, that could have been a marketplace that clients use directly. So I went and had some user research sessions with a bunch of clients and talent, said if we were to build this thing and this is roughly what it could look like and this is how it would work, and you'd still have all the important things, so protection of contracts and insurance and all of those things. Would you use a marketplace? And they were like, yeah, that would be really helpful for us. So that was where the idea for my next business came from, which was theright.fit. So it's a 2-sided marketplace for all different kinds of creative talent, photographers, videographers, makeup artists, stylists, influencers, anything that you'd need for a creative campaign. And clients could come, post their brief, talent could tender on the brief, client could select the people that they want, book. All the transaction happens online and it's completely automated, insurance, contracts, all of those things.
It makes so much sense. It's often that the most important and pivotal startups are they just grow from things that make sense and from a real problem. So you're obviously talented at identifying the problems and acting on it quickly, which is amazing.
I think I recognize, because I'm often in the weeds of a lot of these industries, I feel the friction day to day. So for me, that was like a really clear friction point that I was experiencing. And I was like, this could be solved. Now that I know what I could do with technology, I could solve this using technology. So
for sure.
Obviously I didn't at all know how difficult and how different growing a like high growth, fast tech company would be to growing a traditional agency business. Like I really thought like, I've run this business for whatever it was, 7 years, 8 years. I know how to, read a P&L and manage a team and manage growth and all those things. Completely different to raising venture capital, growing a high growth tech startup. Like could not have been more different of a journey.
Keen to dive more into that. What were the lessons learned and the initial mistakes that you look back and think I could have done this or that differently, or I would advise other people to do this next time?
Yeah. So I think we raised capital very, very early. Like I think we were business was maybe live for 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
And it was a really fantastic thing, but obviously came with a lot of pain points as well. So I'd bootstrapped probably the first, maybe $450,000 of the build and the team. I'd learnt the lesson of, I wanted to bring all of my engineers in-house from day one and product people in-house from day one.
Expensive.
So it's expensive and, certainly far more so than now. Like at least you can vibe code a basic MVP before you go and, raise capital. But yeah, so it had, 2 full stack engineers internally, head of product internally, and then sort of like an account manager. So sort of I bore the costs of that for the first 12, 18 months of getting the product to live. And then we raised very quickly after that, which was helpful in that it de-risked, obviously, my investment in the company. And it allowed us, I was very clear about only raising capital from people who would add strategic value. So who could open doors or had I chose Airtree because they had amazing domain expertise in marketplaces. They'd invested and backed a whole bunch of marketplaces. So they had so much more experience in that than me. So I was very strategic in that. But obviously it's pouring fuel on a fire. Like all of a sudden you're like, okay, these are the growth rates that I've committed to. There's no opportunity to kind of like walk before you run. You're like, I got to go out there. And marketplaces really are like a winner takes most approach. So you've got a finite period of time to really go out, win the market. Both, we had an office in Singapore. We launched an international market. So it was like, you're running really hard and you're running really fast whilst you're trying to sort of build the plane as it's flying. Like it was a really intense period of time. So
do you wish you waited a bit longer before you sought additional capital? Or?
Yeah, and I think probably that I'd had a clearer path of exactly what I needed the capital for, how I was going to deploy it. Like, of course, you were like, need to put more boots on the ground, increase headcount in our engineering team. We didn't have certainly weren't at the point where we had a really clear idea of customer acquisition costs and like, we're going to put $10,000 more a month in the Facebook machine and we're going to get, $20,000 worth of revenue out of it. Like it certainly wasn't at that point yet. And there's no silver bullet, I think, with customer acquisition, but I think if we'd been closer to that point, it would have been easier. So I'd never had a boss before. I'd never had a board before. So obviously investors are not necessarily your boss, but, they're people that you're reporting to on a monthly basis. And, you've set a very sort of clear strategy and plan, and you really need to execute towards that. So I think there was a lot. I was still very young. I don't even know that I was 30 yet. So I was learning a lot of things on the fly, and including things like, what does a great head of product look like? What's the cadence cycle for building product? Like, what should that look like? And just so many different things. Growth acquisition through partnerships. Like, there's just so many things that I had to learn. So I think raising earlier gave me a really great support network of people around me and best in breed people who were obviously vested in our success and wanted to get in and get their hands dirty and open doors and, help, which was fantastic. But it also, I think, really increased the stress on me and the pressure for us to grow really, really quickly, irrespective of whether or not it was maybe the right thing for me, for the business, for the team
at that time. Yeah. And the growth, you mentioned Singapore. How did you approach that, and what other markets did you go into?
Yeah. So obviously we went and did like an addressable market analysis of a bunch of different markets. We did all of APAC.
Okay.
And it was certainly more challenging than I had thought. Singapore we had chosen for our first international expansion because it has the regional head offices for a lot of different holding groups and advertising agencies, and there's a lot of content shot there, so it made sense for us. And less sort of regionalization required in terms of different languages. We already had multi-currency, so those things weren't so challenging. But this was obviously far pre-COVID, so running a internationally dispersed team was challenging. There was only so many times I could get up to Singapore as well as, being CEO here in Australia. So it was a challenging time. It was really interesting. That business still has a great footprint in Asia. So it's certainly gone on to sort of prove out its worth.
Were there any cultural challenges and differences that you had to navigate? Because just thinking about that ecosystem, I imagine they all have their own unique ways of approaching it and what's deemed as respectful. And
absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Cultural sensitivities for sure. So it was one of the things that we hadn't considered was that in Singapore, there's regionalization of a lot of content. So instead of doing one photo shoot, they might do 4 or 5 photo shoots to get different types of content for Indonesia, for example. The look of the talent that would be required in that campaign would be very different to what would be in Japan if they were shooting for the same region. So there was a lot of cultural sensitivities that we had to get our heads around, and even down to how we tagged talent in the platform. So it really had to sort of impact. Obviously, in Australia, we were sort of probably a little bit more broad in if a client was like, we want an Asian talent in this campaign, they're not super niche as to what that might look like. They might say, obviously, South Asian, but there it would be down to very, very particular types of like a particular area of China that they were looking for talent that came from. So because it needed to be reflective of a particular area for the brand to be aligned with. So lots of really tight nuances that we just simply didn't know going into that market.
And I guess having locally engaged staff there helps you bridge that gap.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And how did you manage such a global workforce with like under a similar mission and goal and drive? How did you balance all of that?
It puts a lot of pressure, I think, on the leader. And, this is I was a really big like return to the office straight away after COVID.
You were one of those.
I was one of those ones. Yeah. I just think it puts a lot of pressure on a leader to individually check in with team members when you simply can't see, if you're not walking past someone's desk, you can't see if they're stressed and overwhelmed or if they've got a lot on their plate. We had obviously daily stand-up meetings. We had an end-of-day meeting every day, and then we would have weekly, like each department, so, weekly sales meeting, weekly marketing meeting, all of those things. So, but if you're trying to sit across every element of the business, like I was in, I think we only had probably 30 or 40 staff at that point. So trying to sit across every element of the business, product, marketing, sales, finance, like it's a lot of meetings just to get execution happening. So bringing in really good C-suite leaders, especially in our international markets, helped a lot. So at least I was only having sort of contact with one point person. But I'm still a big advocate. We would bring our international staff into Australia usually quite frequently, or we would go and meet them in Indonesia or somewhere like a local meeting point, because I just don't think you can replicate the speed at which things happen in person and the outcome of the work and the camaraderie and sort of team strength that you build seeing people in person, face to face, and sharing experiences and that water cooler chat. I just don't think
it makes a huge difference. Yeah. That's true. You spoke a lot about the creator industry, and I find that the general public often don't really know much about it. It's seen as this, mythical, amazing models kind of thing.
Yeah.
And with the rise of influencers, they've sort of giving average people a bit more of a lens into that. Obviously, influencers are not quite the same. But
there's a lot of overlap now. Yeah, absolutely.
From your perspective, what are the biggest myths about that whole industry that you wish people knew more of and you could debunk?
It's definitely that people see it as an incredibly glamorized industry, both influencer and like sort of model actor talent more broadly, I think is seen as very glamorous, very exciting, and people don't get to see all of the sort of hard yards that go in behind the scenes. Like I always say, a model's life is really challenging. You're always shooting summer in winter and winter in summer. So you're either freezing cold or really, really hot. And it's a lot of time waiting around on set. Like you can have 12, 14, 16-hour shoot days just to get 4 or 5 shots. So, can be on set really early, 4 or 5 a.m. call times, waiting around for hair and makeup, and then waiting around in between shots. There's usually other talent on set. So, you might be waiting 2-3 hours between shots. So, and then it's all systems go and you've got to be on. And so, yeah, there is a lot that people don't see that happens behind the scene, and all of the castings that a talent has to go to secure a job. So, you probably get turned down from 90% of the job opportunities that you go through.
It's very competitive.
Yeah, it's incredibly competitive, and clients want to see sort of a breadth of people when they're casting for a job. So, and it can come down to the smallest thing, like, you didn't have freckles and they wanted someone specifically with freckles.
And you can't exactly. I mean, you can tattoo freckles these days. But
that's true. That is true.
Yeah.
So we always say to talent, you can't take it personally. It's nothing to do with you. It can be the smallest thing. Yeah. And I think with the influencer industry, people, again, see it as this like really exciting, glamorous industry of like travel and beautiful clothes and
big deals.
Yeah, big deals, exactly. They don't get to see, like, usually it takes a creator 4, 5, 6 years to build a trusted audience online. Very similar to podcasting. Like, you don't just have this overnight success. It's lots of hard yards put into building content, replying to your audience, building trust in a trusted voice, all of those things for years before you earn a cent. So, talent have had to put in, creators, influencers have to put in a lot of time before they start being able to monetize their audience. And then it's a really delicate balance of, how do I do that in a way that doesn't alienate my audience? Like, it has to feel authentic. It has to feel like something that's going to add value both to the brand but also to my audience. So that's really challenging. You don't see the hours that they spend editing or going back and forth on the brand for around approvals or messaging or content timelines. So it's a pretty challenging industry, and there's not a lot of influencers, especially in Australia, who can make a living out of it.
No. And it's been fascinating to watch the industry evolve over time with more diversity and things like that. The recent Victoria's Secret show was really cool to see even like a pregnant woman and bodies shown in their true form.
Yes.
How are you feeling about the future of that industry and where it's going?
Look, overwhelmingly positive. I look at how far it's come from, when I started in the industry some 30 years ago to now. You go, wow, like there is so much more acceptance of diversity, different body types, as you say, that beauty doesn't have a contrived view anymore. Like, there is so much more of a celebration of the every woman, the every man, that beauty comes in a whole bunch of different shapes, sizes, looks, abilities. I think we have 3 models on the books at Wink who wheelchairs and 1 who walks with a cane.
Wow.
And, that would have just been unheard of even maybe 10 years ago, 5-10 years ago. So, I think that's really amazing. Brands are really trying to do the right thing. And what I hate to see is when a brand gets cancelled online for trying something, and maybe they have ethnic diversity, they've really tried, and then there'll be a big blowback saying, well, but you don't have a pregnant woman in your campaign, or you don't have someone with a disability, and you're like, let's celebrate that they're taking steps, and let's assume positive intent. I think if we can get back to that place, because otherwise it becomes a really scary world for a brand.
It does, and they get
paralyzed.
Exactly. We're seeing that more in the beauty industry as well, with like makeup, foundation colors, blushes. It's just never ending. You almost can't win.
Exactly. Same with clothing brands, where I've seen backlash online where people are like, why don't you have XXXXXL plus XXXXS small? And you're like, gosh, we're a small startup brand in Australia.
It's very expensive.
It's incredibly expensive, and we could order 2 units of which maybe 1 will sell. Like, we just don't have the ability. Sure, if we were, Walmart or whatever, of course, but you're operating on tiny margins to build a brand.
You can't have it for everyone at the start. So I'm keen to dive into what's next for you. You've had a really fascinating career so far, and now you're moving more into the AI space. Where did this come from?
Yes. So after exiting The Right Fit, I spun out some IP that I'd been working on for a long time and built Hash Gifted, which was the influencer gifting platform, which I absolutely adored building, and it's got a great team, runs really smoothly now. And instead of taking a sabbatical, which is what I'd promised myself I would do because I got sort of itchy feet, I decided to go and spend a whole bunch of time doing education that I hadn't really had an opportunity to do, I guess. Like, I went and did the AICD course. I went and did a course at Harvard in AI, and finally, I guess, had time to just read blogs, podcasts, watch YouTube videos, like educational content that, I'd been so heads down for 20 years building businesses that I hadn't actually had time to come up for air. So that was probably 2.5, nearly 3 years ago now. And AI to me just jumped out before this sort of explosion now as something that would be absolutely transformative for my businesses. And I think seeing that the businesses that I own and of sort of the industry that I've always worked in was ripe for disruption by AI. Like it was one of the first, like obviously generative AI content, people making video content from scratch.
That is true.
I was like, oh my gosh, what does this mean for the future of models, of influencers, of social content, of the whole creative profession? Will we still have photographers? Will we still go through the process of, actually booking a photo shoot and all of these things? What's the shift going to look like? So I decided I really wanted to go deep in AI and understand not just the tools that were already out there, but sort of thinking strategically about what this was going to mean more broadly for the market and at a sort of macroeconomic level, what was this going to mean for Australia? How do we retain great talent here? How do we build great businesses here? Sort of a little bit of a midlife crisis probably going on.
It's a productive midlife crisis, if you ask me.
So I sort of came out of that period and went, I really want to build something in the AI space. And all of the conversations I was having with people over this time, as I was sort of sharing a lot of my rants and thoughts on LinkedIn and some of my learnings, I was getting so many questions from people saying, I'm terrified, I'm paralyzed, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to start, I don't know where to get information that's relevant to me or my company. I know I need to do something, but I'm operating from a place of fear. Like I'm scared of being left behind. I see that our competitors are doing things and I don't know what we should be doing. We don't have a strategy. I don't know who to lean on for that. Like, is it my CTO? Is it my CIO? Like, do I need to bring in an external consultant? So there was some sort of common concerns and fears from business leaders, entrepreneurs, sort of C-suite. And everyone kind of unanimously was in the same boat. No one was going, oh, I'm great. I've got a great AI strategy. I totally know what I'm doing. And it was partly because obviously the space is moving so quickly.
So quickly, yeah. You can't keep up.
Yeah, but also that we all have BAU to get through, right? Like I couldn't just show up to, if I went to one of my CTOs and said like, great, you're now in charge of AI. Go and evaluate every single, code co-pilot program out there or how our sales team could be doing, using agentic tools for outreach or whatever. Like, they've got an entire roadmap of product features that they're building. They don't have time to do that and not necessarily the skill set either. Just because someone is a CTO does not mean that they are, a great ML person or a data scientist. Like, so you're kind of expecting someone to kind of take that lead. I think founders and entrepreneurs are pretty interested generally because they can see this is either an opportunity for a new revenue stream that didn't exist before or obviously reduction in operational costs, which is, so both of those things are usually pretty exciting to founders and entrepreneurs who are thinking about future stage growth. And so I sort of stepped back and I was like, okay, what if I could just build an amazing team of experts in this space who have worked in digital transformation for a long time, who are data scientists, machine learning experts, AI experts, and who can really just help demystify this for founders, C-suite leaders who are all generally having these same pain points. They don't know how to apply AI in their companies. They don't know if they're ready. Like, how is our data structured? Is this the right time for us? Build versus buy. Like, what is available off the shelf? Again, this is changing so quickly on a day-by-day basis. What's available off the shelf versus what do I need to build as a proprietary offering? How do I make sure I do this safely in a way that's got good governance and, is not going to expose our data in any way, especially, for ASX-listed companies or, there's a real concern over that. And so that was where the idea of building an AI practice came from, and started meeting with some fascinating people in the space and said, like, look, I can really articulate for me as a business leader my concerns and my challenges and, going through implementing AI in my companies, what did I come up against and what skill sets do I need and how can we help offer this to other people? So that was sort of, again, the genesis of the idea of like, I think there's something in this. I see a pain point that could be solved.
You've acted quickly.
Yeah, and decided to sort of bring that to life. So it's been fascinating. It's been amazing working with, people from very technologically enabled businesses, that are tech-first companies or ISVs who, have a CIO, CTO, whatever, and are ready right through to super traditional businesses that, maybe have heavy supply chain or operations businesses that need to be automated, that where agentic can be really, really powerful for them. And just going through that process with them of helping them understand what it could look like, helping them get a board-ready plan together that they feel really confident in. And I think the trickle-down impact of that for their teams, because obviously, most of these businesses have quite large teams. The teams are kind of going, we know that we keep reading about in the news, like AI is here. what is our company doing? Do we have a plan? Do we have a strategy? What's that going to mean for my job or my department or our industry or our company?
Or they could be secretly using it at work and being scared about, should I tell my boss?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Uploading loads of confidential information to ChatGPT. Yep. We've seen some horror stories of that. Not understanding, wanting to use it because they go, I can do my job faster, better. I want to do the right thing for my company. I want to have as much output as possible. I want to add as much value as possible, but not realizing the sort of second order effects of that. So helping sort of businesses, I guess, go through that transition and understanding, obviously it's so different on a case-by-case basis, like where are the opportunities for them? Where should they start? Prioritizing them, giving them a bit of a roadmap. And often it's like a 90-day plan.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you want to go from here? What's going to have the highest impact right now? Where are the easy wins? What's more of a long-term game? And just giving them, I think, control so they're operating from a place of confidence and not reactive fear, which I think is never great for decision making.
Yeah. You hinted on the ethical side, which I find super fascinating because it's such a huge and impressive undertaking, but there are a lot of regulatory components. And to be honest, I think the government is really behind on this. They really need to step it up. But how are you approaching that ethical side of things and what lenses or approaches are you taking?
Yeah.
Because it's a really uncharted territory.
Totally. And you're absolutely right. Like sadly, governance always trails commercial outcomes and approaches. And I think sadly Australia, generally trails the rest of the world. Like Europe is doing a pretty good job. Whilst I think maybe they've gone too far in some ways where it's, really shut down commercial competitiveness and perhaps going to set that entire region back, which is sad. But I really do think, it needs to come from it needs to be a national plan and there needs to be a national approach to this. Like we can't have siloed, either state-based, you look at what the US is doing and having state-based, rules and laws and governance around how AI is used or rolled out, testing, all of those things. I think for most companies, it's about how do you construct a healthy, robust dialogue around the ethics of AI and governance. So how do you help them have enough information that they understand where the risks are? How do you walk through most of them have sort of like a risk framework that they will go through. How do you help their, risk usually they have like a finance audit and risk committee on their boards. How do you help boards understand where the risks are, what they should be thinking about when they're making decisions about implementing new tools or setting new policies? And then how do you help them come up with an AI policy that's really suitable to their organization? Because as you touched on, like highly regulated industries, fintech, gambling, health tech, there's obviously some that have incredibly high regulations, for all the right reasons. How do you help them understand the framework in which they operate?
Mm-hmm.
And actually just have these robust discussions, whether that's, bringing in an outside expert who can help moderate that or spark those conversations. And then it's really going to be on a case-by-case basis as to the risk appetite of that company, the regulatory framework that they work within, and also the level of understanding they have about how these tools and sort of open source software, how they operate, how the data sets are built and how their own data is structured, what their own security protocol is at the moment.
It sounds like you and your co-founder, Annalise, are the perfect combination of people to take this on. It just makes sense. What do you think are the impacts to the creative industry? Are there any early use cases and where do you see it going?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so in two minds about this because I do think there are so many incredible tools out there now. You've probably played with a number of them like Runway and Kling, the new Nano Banana that came out 4 days ago, the Google LLM. So it's particularly designed for image generation. So it's just phenomenal. Like it's come leaps and bounds since the last iteration. So there's so many tools out there that can make a creator's life so much easier. You can do multi-version edits really quickly, obviously language translation, all of these things. So I think it's really enhancing creators' ability to do their job really, really well. Obviously, the flip side to that is that, yes, I think that there are going to be a number of jobs and a number of professions that are going to be replaced. Like one of the use cases for the new Nano Banana is like you can make amazing infographics just from stats, so you can upload even like a company's earning report and say, turn this into an infographic explaining, this 200-page earnings report from NVIDIA. Like turn it into something visual that I can understand or that I can share on social media, and it can happen like so.
That's an analyst job gone.
Correct. So there's so many touch points in that, as you say, like analysts, graphic designers, creatives, illustrators, a marketing manager, a marketing assistant.
And hours of meetings no longer needed.
Correct. So, I really am in two minds. I really do think that overarchingly, I think AI is going to be a net positive. I think we're going to find new jobs, new skills. I think it's going to help us do some really meaningful research in the world. Like I still have so much confidence that this will be the thing that helps us solve climate change and cancer research and all of those things. So I really do feel like it's going to be a net positive overall. I think we just can't rely on commercial organizations to be the moderators of how AI is used, because obviously their responsibility is to deliver shareholder value, and I completely understand that and respect that. They are not the best people to be going, should we invest time, energy, and you look at Meta and Amazon and some of these organizations, of course they're going to go, what gives us the most growth and returns for shareholders?
That's the incentive,
as opposed to going, what's going to long-term help society and make sure we don't wipe ourselves out. So I think there needs to be some organizations that sort of work at a global level to really do that, and nations really need to have a plan. And I think sadly, we certainly don't have one in Australia yet.
Unfortunately. Hopefully it changes soon.
Yes.
With a lot of companies now looking to AI and, like you said, not sure how to go about it, what are some early mistakes you're seeing them make as they try to adopt or make some sense of it?
Yeah, I think probably purely focusing on cost reduction. So
that's true.
I think looking at okay, we could downsize our sales force by 25% or reduce our engineering headcount by 30%. Like let's use code completion tools or whatever it might be. Like finding those sort of what seem to be more obvious use cases or tangible use cases that they can understand, as opposed to actually sitting down and having an overarching strategy and going, okay, before we start anything, before we go, every staff member must use code completion software and, we're not hiring any more engineers. Like what's our actual strategy and what's the best use of the data that we have in this organization? There's potentially like amazing new revenue unlocks that you could have. And we see a lot of people, instead of thinking about building, I guess, the trunk of the tree and really streamlining where your data is stored, how clean is it, building an AI first business instead of going and building all these little offshoots of like, oh, now customer success is dealt with in this particular way that does not connect to anything else. If you don't go and do this core piece first, you end up with a whole bunch of little projects that you've started or that maybe work in silos but have no connectivity together, and you don't have any sort of underlying scalable framework. So it's kind of the boring, dull stuff to do first.
But most important.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like it then ties in well to the company's overall strategy. It sounds like it helps them reaffirm what their purpose and goal is and how then AI plays a role in that and helping them achieve it.
And one of the most interesting things we've seen is companies who are so self-aware and go, our business is not going to exist in 20 years. Like we're very well aware of this and we need to do something. So if we're a WordPress developer site and that's our current offering, we know that that's not going to exist anymore. So what can we do? What's our new business model? What are our new revenue streams? What data do we have to build new offerings on top of? And so companies having that level of future thinking and self-awareness, I think they're the companies that will win with AI, because you think you have to be able to take a critical look at, it's not about making incremental 5-10% savings. It's about, what is our business going to look like in 2, 3, 5, 10 years' time? And it's exactly the process that I'm going through with my companies of like, okay, if modeling agencies don't exist anymore, well, what will exist in future? What data do we have? What interesting products or services could we build that will exist in the next 3, 5, 10 years?
Yeah, and some of the most successful brands today, and I say brand, not company, they exist because they have evolved over time.
Absolutely.
And they have completely changed their sectors, the industry, their offering. And I think, like you said, is looking to the future, accepting what's going to happen and thinking about how you're going to pivot and add value to society.
Yeah. And maintain that trust with your customer, irrespective of, as you say, what pivot, what new direction you go in.
For sure. This has been a very dynamic and interesting conversation.
I've loved it.
If you could go back to 21-year-old Taryn and tell her something or a few words, what would you tell Taryn?
God, great question. Probably, I think maybe to enjoy the journey a little bit more, especially in that first 10 years. Like I worked 24 hours a day. I worked, I worked weekends probably for the first 5 years. I, cancelled almost all of my social activities. I just threw everything that I had into growing the business, which, it's impossible to look back and know if I'd done that differently, would the business have got to where it is today, or, same with any of my companies, I suppose. But I think I probably didn't celebrate any of the incremental successes along the way. I really didn't come up for air and go, wow, a great example of like, you raise capital. Do you celebrate when you get the term sheet? Do you celebrate when the cash hits the bank? No, there's never a good time because you're like, I've signed the term sheet, but it could fall over. We sign the final documents, but now, we need the cash to hit the bank. Now we actually need to go and execute on all those things we said we did. So I think for a lot of my career, I was so focused on what's next, instead of like, wow, we've achieved some really incredible things. And actually, probably just enjoying the journey, taking stock along the way.
Yeah, some wise words. Enjoy the journey. Thank you so much. It's been lovely having you on Fayl Tales.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome to Fayl Tales, the podcast that dives into the raw side of entrepreneurship. I'm Loveth, and I sit down with founders and innovators to explore the failures, tough pivots, and hard lessons learned on their way to success. These are the stories you don't hear, but the lessons you definitely want to take with you.